At the start of this series, I set out to build this shed cheaper and of better quality materials than the pre-built one in the local garden centre. But did I actually manage to achieve it? Well, you're going to find out later in this episode. But before we do that, I'm going to teach you how to clad and finish your shed and make it last for at least 25 years. So the first thing we're going to do before we apply any cladding to the sides of our shed is we're going to work out the cover. So I've got 3 boards laid on here, leave them there, hold that thought. And if we come over here, what you'll see is if we just start cladding this building, by the time we get to the top there, we could end up with a little sliver of a cut, and that would not look very attractive. So what we want is at least half of a cladding board at the bottom where we start and at the top where we finish. Now to do that and to get it to work out right, we need to know what the cover of our cladding boards is. Now for this job I'm using shiplap cladding. This is a softwood cladding. I got it from a local timber yard. It's 120mm in width and it's 20mm in thickness. But you can see here we've got a 10mm rebate on the back. The reason for that 10mm is it sits over the top of this tongue here. The width, 120mm of one of them cladding boards, is not the same as the cover as one of them cladding boards because you've got that tongue. So the easy way to do it is to lay these boards out, join them together and then mark out for the cover and apply that to the building. I know that sounds confusing, let me break it down. So the best way to do it, 3 boards, join all 3 together, laid on the floor, push together like that. Now sometimes they're warped, you can see that one's warped, so it's got a bit of a bow in it. You want them pushed tight together. So this one's warped as well. That's the joy of softwood. Now I've got a bar clamp and I'm going to clamp it there so it can't move. There you go, you see it's pulled that in. And now you'll see that the assumed cover is completely different to what you thought it'd be in the first place. So it's 340mm. So for every 3 planks, you're covering 340mm. Now grab a long piece of timber. This is a roofing batten. I held it where my cladding starts and then I've cut it just at the top underneath the fascia there, near where my cladding is going to finish. Now you saw me clamp those boards tight together and that gave us that gauge or cover of 340mm. So they would all be tight together just like that. So you can see that tongue is in that groove there and it's tight together. However, we don't fit cladding pulled really tight together because there wouldn't be an expansion joint. What you actually want is just a couple of mils. So when we're fitting these, we'll raise them up just a couple of mil, and that will allow over the years expansion and contraction so that the boards don't pop over the nails and eventually come off. We need to factor that into our gauge or cover as we work up the building, because those few mil over 25-ish planks to get to the top there will end up as 50mm, so that'll be half of a board and it won't look right. So we need to factor that in onto that stick that we've just cut. So from the bottom of the stick we've got 340mm for every 3, but we also want to add 6mm for the expansion gaps for 3 of those boards. So we've got 1, 2, 3. That'll give us 346mm per 3 planks. Now I'm going to work my way up the stick, marking every 346mm. There's my last mark. When I get to the end, 346 doesn't fit on the stick, so I need to divide the planks down. Divided down, the planks are 115mm. So we've got this gap between this board here and the top of the fascia, which is somewhere here. So I've brought my stick back over here to see how it works out, and what we're going to see is we're going to finish somewhere here at the top of this stick, and that would leave us a tiny little 30mm piece of cladding in the top, and it won't look very attractive. So now is where you need to choose what looks aesthetically pleasing to you. I don't think about 30mm of a plank looks aesthetically pleasing. So what I want to do is increase that to half of a plank. The problem with increasing that to half a plank at the top is that it won't fit, of course. The only way to get that to fit is to reduce the thickness of our first plank. So the best way in this case to do it would be not use a full one, rip this one in half, and that would then give us a little bit more than half at the top. So what we're going to do now is we're going to rip that first board down and get it fixed to the building, because fixing that first board, that is the most important one. If we fix that first plank wrong, we would be in a world of trouble by the time we get further in this job. I'm using a table saw to rip down these planks to the correct length, but you don't have to. You can use a circular saw, which is a much more common and versatile tool that most of you will already own. Now we need to know the length of our building minus a couple of mil at each end for expansion and contraction. So now we've got our first plank cut to length and cut to width to account for where our last one finishes. I know what you're thinking, you just made a cut that's going to be exposed to moisture. Don't worry, we're going to treat these a little bit later in the video to show you how to make this last a very long time. What we're going to do now is we're going to fix this to the building because, like I said before, this is the most important one. Now for me, things are a little bit tricky because I've got these sleepers holding back all this soil around this shed, and that means I can't get my nail gun in here to fix these first couple of cladding boards. Now, all of your cladding will be fixed with nails, and I'll explain that shortly. Unfortunately for me, I'm going to do what I'd advise you don't do, and I'm going to have to screw this one. I've got no choice. The only thing I can get in here is an impact driver, but like I say, I don't advise that. Use your nail gun, and don't worry, I'll show you how to use the nail gun when we get up to around this height. I'll show you what nails to use, I'll show you what fixing method to use, because there are a couple of variations in that and different ways that different people do it. I'll show you all that, but we do need to get this first one fixed, and like I say, people are going to say in the comments why you're screwing it. Quite simply because I've got absolutely no other choice than to screw for these first few planks. Now it's absolutely critical that we get this first starter one level, because if we don't, by the time we get to the top, we'll have a huge uneven cut. It won't be level at all. It'll get worse as we go up the building. So it's critical that we get this level. I'm using a 6-foot level, and I'm going to place that on the top of this first plank. I'll fix it to the timber behind with exterior grade screws. I'll do that all the way to the end of that first plank, making sure it's perfectly level as I work my way along. Now we need to know where the studs are that we're fixing to. If you're fixing to battens externally, you'll be able to see them, and you'll be able to see exactly where you put your nails in to fix your cladding boards. Now don't forget, this is part of a 4-part series. We put this membrane on in the last episode 3, and our stud work is 400mm apart. You can see there's a stud there, there's a stud there, there's then going to be a stud just here. It'll be doubled up around the window, so it's a bit easier around there, but we need to see where those studs are to get a good nail, good fixing in every 400mm. I'll pop my 6-foot level on that mark, lay it on the top of the first plank we just fixed, and just run a line down the edge of that level. Now I'm going to use my miter saw. Again, if you don't have one, use a circular saw and a speed square just to cut down a load of planks. Maybe start with 10 planks to then get them fixed to the building. Cut them to that measurement that we took to the size of the building. Now I'm going to show you how we fix our planks to the building, and you can see I've done a few. That's just to get up past them sleepers so I can show you the proper way, which is a 16 gauge nail gun. That's what we're going to use to do it. The nails that we're going to use, or pins, they are stainless steel. We don't want to use the galvanized ones. The coating comes off them sometimes and they rust, and we don't want rust streaks running down the outside of the building once it's treated or painted, so we're going to use stainless steel ones. So what we're going to do is we're going to lay our plank with, you see that rebate, that groove there? We're going to lay that plank on roughly for now, and we're going to just line that up with the edge of the building, and then we need to create a couple of mil gap between the two planks for the expansion. The way I do this, I just lift this up a couple of mil. You can just do it by hand if you want, eye that couple of mil, but I've got a little nail there, that's a couple of mil. Lay that down on the nail, and then grab the pin gun, and about 1/3 of the way up the board you want to pin it. So somewhere there, slight angle, very slight angle, pin it. What that does is that pulls the tongue on this previous plank in tight to the building, because softwood does warp and move around. At the minute, when I let go of this, this is going to come away from the building. It's going to more than likely warp, especially if the plank is bad. What that nail there does, 1/3 of the way up, it misses the tongue, so it allows for the expansion and contraction, and it pulls that tongue in tight. So that's one way of fixing them. You can see how warped this plank is. I make sure it's somewhat level as I go along. All I'm going to do, I can make small adjustments. Sometimes the plank has got a crown in it. If it's got a crown in it, you might have to push it down. You can see it's got a very slight one, a couple of mil in there. We might have to just adjust that as we go. Now, that's actually pretty good, pretty level. Remember, softwood's always going to move around. It's never going to be 100% perfect. Don't do this to me. There we go, pin it. You can see it's away at the top there, and that's what I'm talking about. That next plank, that'll bring that in. So we're going to do this on every single stud. Just give it a push. Now that way of doing it keeps your visuals down to just one pin per board. Missed one there. Some people don't like to see any pins. There's a way to do that as well. I'll show you on this one as an example, although this is a bit bowed. This only really works when the planks are not bowed, to be honest. Something like a high quality red cedar, you wouldn't want to see any pins. So what you'd do is you'd use secret nails. So you'd go at the top of that tongue there, you'd fire a nail in the very top of the tongue at an angle downwards, and that would hold the plank. Only works if they're not bowed, otherwise the bottom will kick out and it'll look awful anyway. Of course, if you're using the secret nail method, you wouldn't have that pin there, you just have that one, and then once you put this plank on, it covers the pin, so you don't have any pins visually. On a higher quality plank, that would be the way I would do it. Something like a very expensive red cedar, you're not going to want to see the pins. So I'd use secret nail technique for that type of application. So that's the basics of setting out, cutting and fixing your cladding to your building. And once we get up to the window, I'll show you how we cut around obstacles like windows and doors. And then we'll look at weatherproofing and we'll see if I came in under the cost of a pre-built shed. Right, to cut round something, line the end of your cladding up with the previous plank. So we know that that plank is now in the correct position, and sit it just on the tongue there. What I'm then going to do is I'm going to mark the very edge of the board in line with the reveal for the window. So there and there. I now know the width that I need to remove from this plank. What I'm then going to do is make a very small mark just at the bottom of the cladding board that I'm putting on. Make sure it's pulled down tight and make a very small pencil mark, one that you're not going to see later preferably. So make a very small mark there, and then remove the board. We now need to measure from the very edge of the reveal, or the sill if you've got a sill, down to that pencil line. And in this case, that's 35 millimeters. So that's the top, that's the bottom. We only want to leave 35 millimeters in. You can see the edge of the reveal there. So I'll mark 35. That's all we want to keep, is that 35 mil. I've done that the other side. I run a straight edge between the two marks and just make a line. I'm going to just make a mark with my pencil down the edge there. Now I'll use a jigsaw and a wood blade to cut the shape of that window into my plank. Then, just like before, fix it in place with the nail gun. Once you've learnt this, it's pretty easy. You do exactly the same as what we've done here at the top of the window, and at the sides of the windows, you just cut shorter pieces of cladding to fit each side of the window. We've then worked our way to the very top plank. And for that very top one, all we're going to do is use a tape measure to take a measurement of the gap, but remember to include the overlap between the two tongues. And then, like I have here, rip down a board to fit that gap perfectly. With this very top one, you'll want a couple of mil gap. You only need a couple of mil between the fascia and where the board meets the board underneath, just so that it can move. This one's a little bit bowed, but we will get it in, and we're probably going to have to put a couple of nails in here, just a row of nails underneath the fascia as well, because we haven't got another board that goes over the top to hold it in. So that's one side done. Now I'm going to do the other sides around the door, and then we're going to put the end posts in and trim around the windows. So the bit you'll probably find complicated if you've got an apex roof is to cut this angle here. Now, the easy way to do it is to lay that one on your very top board, lay one up against it and draw the angle. And then you'll be able to use your pattern for every single plank as you work all the way up to the top of the roof. Now you could use a bevel to work this out, but once you've got these little pattern cuts, they're really easy because they fit perfectly. You just add them onto your plank length, you mark the plank that you're putting up, cut it, and you always end up with the same angle. So the cladding's all on, now we just need to trim it up. The cladding's 20 mil, so we've cut some 22 by 22 mil corner posts, and all they do is they nail on the corners, and you can see that creates a trim that you can't see through, that the cladding butts up against, so you don't see the edges. So the corners are trimmed up, they look nice and neat. The doors and windows, I'm doing in a very similar way. It's a little bit different. I have used a bit of cladding, a bit with the female tongue on there because it looks the neatest, but it's entirely up to you how you do this. I've just ripped down a piece of cladding, and once you've got these nailed in, you can see what it looks like. Looks nice and neat around any doors and windows. This video is sponsored by Ultimate Tool Competitions, my website where one of you lucky winners is going to win this monster 30-piece Makita power tool kit. This kit's jam-packed with everything you might need, including the latest first and second fix nail guns from Makita, a plunge saw kit including the rails, and enough batteries to power the whole kit. So to be in with a chance of winning this huge kit, make sure you head to the link in the description where the tickets are just £1 and you could be in with a chance of this lot landing on your doorstep. Now I've got a couple of trims to finish up, but I want to show you how I'm going to weatherproof the whole thing because I want this shed to last at least 25 years. Now I didn't show you how to install the rubber roof, but this building has got a rubber roof on it. It's the same process as felt really, except you've got some rubber roof trims around the side and you glue it down rather than nailing it down. Essentially, you've got to make a decision whether you want to use a rubber roof or a felt roof. I'd advise using a rubber roof, it's going to give you much better longevity. Now in terms of the paint that we're going to use on the outside, I'm going to do the fascias to give it a little bit of extra detail. I'm going to do them in Zinsser Satin Black. This exterior paint says 15 years on it. I've been using this for years. I did a gate, I've done fascias in this, I've done my outdoor kitchen in this, all of which weather really, really well. So this black satin, I've used it many times and I'll be using it again on the fascia. And what we're going to do for the outside, because the garden room is actually silver birch, if you guys remember my garden room series, you can see there, the colour's actually silver birch. Now I'm never going to match that perfectly, but I've gone for silver birch cuprinol shades. This stuff should give us a nice little bit of colour and many years of protection on our untreated wood that we used for that cladding. So we'll get these two on, get this thing painted, protected and looking great, and then we'll see if I actually saved any money by building the shed myself. I think by painting around the fascia, it gives the building a little bit more of a dynamic look, having the two different colours, than if I just went with one colour. To make sure it's got good coverage and weatherproofing properties, it'll get 2 coats of this black paint. So I'm putting 2 coats of this cuprinol shades on the shed, and it says that 2 coats will give us 6 years of waterproofing and protection. Now I can't vouch for that. I have never used this particular cuprinol product before, but if it does what it says it does and if the reviews on it are accurate, then it should be pretty good. The video wouldn't really be complete unless I show you the inside. Now I have done a few little luxuries that would put you over budget. I've put a nice floor in here. It's only lino, but it stops water getting into that OSB from above, should that ever happen. It's just about preserving the life of this shed. But you can see how much more luxurious just even that membrane makes the thing. It makes it feel a lot more premium and a lot more expensive. I've got to finish putting the beads in the window, so don't judge that. I've put a few little shelves in just to hold light things and to give myself a little bit more storage space. But it looks really good in here. It's a really big, really solid shed. To be fair, if you insulated it, you could use it as a garden room as well. The shed's done, it looks amazing, and I'm chuffed with it, and I've no doubt that it's going to last at least 25 years. But now the bit you've all been waiting for, the cost breakdown, to see if we did it cheaper than the shed in the garden centre. If you remember, in one of the previous episodes, I wanted to do this for £2 grand. So let's see if I came in under £2 grand. So if you remember, I put this on a concrete pier base, much stronger than the one you could find in the garden centre, and that cost me £400, but that does have the strength of a concrete pad and will last a lot longer than any timber base. So £400 for the base, and then you've got the timber for the walls, and that came in at another £400, and that is double the strength. It's structurally, if not more, than the one you see in the garden centre. You've then got the timber for the apex roof. We did that in the third episode, that lovely apex roof, and that came in at £300. And then we've got the rubber roof and trims, much more durable than the felt roof that comes with the pre-built shed in the garden centre, but also more expensive. So this one is optional. You'd be able to felt a shed roof for £100, probably even less. I went for a rubber roof, which is quite expensive, and that was another £300. You'll see we're getting dangerously close to that £2,000 target. Next up, timber cladding. Now, the cladding is always going to be the most expensive part of any shed build. Even more expensive if you go for something longer lasting like a composite. So we cheaped out a bit on this one and went for timber cladding from the local timber yard of £700. Now you'll notice that that brings us in at £2,100. So already over budget, but still less than the garden centre shed at a much higher quality. But you can see that's not quite all of it yet either, because I've added a couple of more bits on the bottom. I went for a used French door and a used window. Now you can get these on Facebook Marketplace. I had a little look. You can get these under £100. So grab yourself one of them and make your shed to it, and that'll save you some money. It'll probably actually be around the same money as timber, but you get a much better product at the end of it. And your flooring and paint. I put cheap lino down and I painted this with what you just saw, the Cooper & Old paint and the Zinsa black around the top. And that will, for all of that stuff, come in under £100. So that brings us in at a total of £2,300 for this whole shed build. So I failed to come in under my initial budget of £2,000, but the story doesn't quite end there, does it? Because look at the quality of this shed versus the pre-built one in the local garden centre. The quality isn't even comparable, and for a shed the size that I've built, you'd be paying a considerable amount more. And you got to enjoy the experience and learn a few things along the way. So build yourself one of these, and if you want to learn more about outdoor builds, click on one of these videos, and I'll see you guys in the next one.